crazy. I hit this button, and now everybody on Twitch can also hear you.
Hi, people on Twitch.
So go ahead and tell everybody who you are and what you do, and explain what a tie-in writer is. I had to explain it to a lot of people when I was like, "I'm so excited, Keith's gonna be here," and they're like, "What's a tie-in writer?" I was like, "I don't want to have this conversation."
Okay, well, let's start with I am Keith R.A. DeCandido. I write books. I also write short stories and comic books and pop culture commentary and travels and dirty limericks, whatever they'll pay me for. Um, I also, when I'm not writing, I also work as an editor periodically. Uh, my wife and I have started delving into the ridiculous world of small press publishing, about which the less said the better. Um, the I also am a musician. I'm a martial artist. Recently got my fourth degree black belt in karate, and probably a baseball fan, and probably some other stuff that I can't remember.
And happy belated birthday, and
Oh,
happy anniversary.
thank you. Yes, I turned 53 on Monday, and my wife and I celebrated our fifth wedding anniversary yesterday. So, um, yeah, it's been a busy week. um, uh, and I also do other stuff probably that I can't remember because I actually don't get a great deal of sleep. Um, I have written at this point. I'm actually currently about halfway through my 60th novel. Um, the other 59 have already been published. Um, going back to 1998, the first novel was published. I have almost 100 short stories, of which the first was published in 1994, and I've written some 50 odd comic books, um, and more nonfiction than I'm really entirely comfortable counting. I write regularly for Tor.com, writing about pop culture and such, um, particularly writing about Star Trek and screen adaptations of superhero comic books. I've written other stuff too, but that's most of what I do for them. I
So
also have a
what
Patreon.
what you're saying is you have a lot of free time.
Absolutely not. And whoever was in the chat who said I want to be you when I grow up, the joke's on you because I haven't grown up yet. Haha. Um, uh, pursuant to this particular uh, mention, as I've written a great deal of gaming fiction, including short stories and novels and one comic book. Well, so far one comic book, uh, based on various games. I've written a Dungeons and Dragons novel, a World of Warcraft novel, a StarCraft novel, a Command and Conquer novel, three Resident Evil movie novelizations, a couple of BattleTech short stories, a Magic the Gathering short story, um, and I am currently waiting for final approval on a 5-issue Resident Evil comic book, which is a tie-in to the Infinite Darkness animated series that is on Netflix.
So
The art's being worked on right
can
now.
you remind everybody what a tie-in writer is?
Yes, I was getting to
Okay,
that.
sorry.
The what a tie-in writer is somebody who writes a uh, a work of fiction that ties into something in a different medium. The most obvious and common examples are the many novels that have been written in the Star Wars and Star Trek universes, which you can find at your local bookstore with the greatest of ease. Um, in addition, there are, like I mentioned, I've written novels based on various games as well. My first work of fiction was a Spider-Man short story. So it was a Spider-Man story, but it was in prose. Um, and Sorry, there's like hair in my face. It's an occupational hazard when you have hair like this. Um, the the process by which it happens is a publisher will buy the rights from the IP holder, whether it's Disney for Star Wars, whether it's the Blizzard games for World of Warcraft, um, Paramount for Star Trek, uh, Capcom for Resident Evil, and so on. And they will publisher will buy the rights to do fiction based on this property from the IP holder. and they turn around and they will hire a writer like me um, to write fiction based on that property. Uh, the fiction has to go through an approvals process. You start with an outline, and then that goes to somebody at the copyright holder. Um, to give a gaming example, in 2006, I wrote both a World of Warcraft and a StarCraft novel, and in both cases, I worked very closely with Chris Metzen, who at the time was in charge of the game stories for for all three of Blizzard's games, for WoW, for StarCraft, and for Diablo. And he and I worked out the outlines for both those books together, um, which involved a great deal of time over the phone, which was very productive. And then once the outline's done, you write the book based on that outline. That also has to be approved, as does the cover art and every other damn thing. Uh, how you become one? Now that's a tricky question because if you ask any 10 writers how they broke into the field, you will get 12 different answers. Um, the Everybody's got their own odd way of doing it. In my particular case, uh, I got in it as an editor initially. I From 1993 until 1998, I worked for the late Byron Price, who was a book packager, and as one of the editors working for him, I got to work on a great deal of licensed work of tie-in books like this, and that gave me not only the opportunity to um, publish a great deal of it and hire people to write tie-in fiction, but some of the people I was hiring were also editors in charge of other tie-in lines. As an example, um, I was talking with the people at Wizards of the Coast. Magic the Gathering was brand new when I was starting there. This was, like I said, 1993, 94. So it was when Magic was just debuting and taking the world by storm. And I was actually talking to them about the possibility of hiring some of their artists to do work for us. That never went anywhere. But talking to them gave me the opportunity to pitch a Magic story for the anthology Distant Plains, which was published in 1995. In another case, one of the writers I was buying a story from, an X-Men story from actually, was editing a Doctor Who anthology, and I basically jumped up and down and said, "Ooh, ooh, ooh," because I've been watching Doctor Who since I was 8, and therefore got to pitch a story to a Doctor Who anthology, which was published in 1996, and it snowballed from there. As a general rule, the best way to start doing tie-in fiction is to establish yourself as a professional writer first of your own stuff. And the reason for that is, and I can say this safely as somebody who has also edited tie-in fiction, um, editors of tie-in fiction want to work with people who know what they're doing, who have established themselves, because there is so much other garbage you have to deal with as an editor of tie-in fiction because of that lengthy approvals process that I mentioned earlier. So for that reason, they really want somebody to they don't have time to also nurse a newbie through the process on top of everything. So editors, just a general rule, and it's not a hard and fast rule. Like everything in writing and publishing, the primary answer to almost any question is it depends. Um, so you've got to there are different ways of doing this, but generally, if you establish yourself as a professional first, you're more likely to get the opportunity to pitch to various tie-in lines. Uh, so yeah. To answer one question in the chat, no, there is no apprenticeship program, and boy, am I bitter about that. As for knowing a lot of lore, yes, it helps a lot. Um, it is not required that you be a fan of the material before you start. However, it is required that you know the material really well when you start. Um, and even if you do know the material very well when you start, you're still going to be doing a crap ton of research. Um, as an example, I in 2013, I wrote a Leverage novel based on the TV show, which is recently revised as Leverage Redemption. I watched the show religiously. I love that show, as do other people in the chat, I see, and um, it's tremendous fun. I watched every show religiously. Having said that, when I got the gig, I went back and rewatched everything anyway, even though I memorized half the episodes, because you look for different things when you're going to be writing in a universe. You're paying attention. You have to pay closer attention to how the characters talk, how they interact, what the structure of the show is, um, how things work in the show, and so on. You have to do that. In the case of the gaming fiction I've written, in every single case, the gaming company provided me with a whole bunch of material. Blizzard had an avalanche of material to send me, particularly for World of Warcraft, um, and so on. They provide you with as much material as possible. Um, so yeah, um, so that yeah, that's a huge part of it is making sure that you know all the stuff. Even if you think you already know it, you got to go over it again because you look for different things when you're writing in it than when you're just enjoying it for fun. There are aspects of characters that you don't really cotton to until you watch it with an eye for it. Uh, my oh sure, let's derail the conversation. The my I have been asked what my thoughts are on the Blizzard scandals. My thoughts are I really hope it leads to better things at Blizzard. Um, I haven't worked with Blizzard since 2007, 8, something like that. Um, so I have no direct connection with them anymore. I don't think any of the people I worked with then are there now. Um, uh, I, I I don't think anybody's completely irredeemable. And I haven't been paying close enough attention to know all the specifics because again, I don't play any of the games. Mostly because I don't have time. Ironically, for somebody who writes gaming fiction, I don't actually have time to play the games because I'm too busy writing. Um, which is an unfortunate side effect of being as busy as I am. I just don't have time to you know play the games. Besides, I've seen what those games do to people. I mean, in terms of time sinks, and I have too many time sinks in my life as it is. But you know, it's it's tough. The I mean, I hope that the end result of all this is a better working environment. But I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about it, so I should probably stop answering that question. Instead, ask for new, more interesting. There must be some questions. It is a Q and A. What was my favorite what? Oh, favorite game or favorite property in general? Favorite time. Wouldn't be a gaming uh novel. It would be one of my Star Trek novels, of which I've written over a dozen. Um, there was well, actually, there are two tie-in books that I would list as my favorite. I'd have a hard time narrowing it between these two. One is a Star Trek book, which was called Articles of the Federation. It came out in 2005, and it was a basically a mixture of Star Trek and The West Wing. It was a year in the life of the Federation president. Um, over the course of uh, over the course of Star Trek's history up to that point, um, it had uh, never we'd never gotten a really solid look at the Federation government. We gotten glances here and there, and on three occasions prior to my writing this book, we had seen a Federation president on screen. We have since seen a fourth, um, but the we hadn't really gotten a deep dive of how the Federation government works. We'd seen how the Klingon government works, the Romulan government works, the Bajoran government works, the Cardassian government, but never really a good look at the home government, as it were. I changed that, and uh, and articles provided a great in-depth look, and several over the next 15 years, uh, the Star Trek fiction that was being published used what I established in articles as a guideline for how to write the Federation government going forward. Um, and I know that at least one of the people on the writing staff, on the production staff of the current Star Trek shows, is a fan of what I did in articles, and that was at least to some degree an influence on how, for example, President Rillick in the fourth season of Star Trek Discovery was written, and hopefully will be seen more and more. But we that and the other favorite tie-in book would be a Buffy the Vampire Slayer novel that I wrote in 2006 or 2005. I forget. 2000, yeah, 2006. Same year as the Warcraft and Starcraft book, as it happens. It was called Blackout, which was a novel that took place almost entirely in New York in 1977. Um, and it involved one of the previous Slayers, Nikki Wood, the one Spike killed on the subway, and it's basically her story. So I wrote it as if Buffy had been created in the 1970s by Gordon Parks, the director of Shaft, instead of instead of by Joss Whedon in the 1990s. And I had so much fun with that because that was my childhood. I grew up in New York in the 1970s. It it was like reliving my childhood, and it was so much fun. Um, do I have any editing stories of writers that were so bad their work was uneditable? No, I don't. Everybody was editable up to a point. Um, the biggest problem I've had as an editor uh, was um, editing somebody who would not permit themselves to be. Actually, the worst was, and I won't say who the writer was. One particular writer I was working with, who was very well regarded and big name, and that writer wanted their spouse to also have a story in the anthology that this writer was in. The spouse was a terrible writer, um, and we basically had to include the spouse in order to get the big name writer. The big name writer also did not allow themselves to be edited, but they were also good enough that it was okay. Um, uh, that everybody can be edited. I mean, everybody can use editing, even the best writers out there. This particular writer was good enough that even their unedited work is still pretty damn good. So we're willing to take, not take a very light hand with that and only edit things at their pleasure. We really wanted to edit the spouse's story, and we were not permitted to, which was frustrating because it was terrible. But um, I I have I have worked on a couple of I've worked with a couple of clients who were really not had no conception of how English grammar worked. And I worked with them as best I could and tried to, I did what I would have done in those situations where it's like wrong capitalization, no punctuations, too many shorthands and stuff that is appropriate for a text message but not for a work of fiction, was to basically take one chapter of the novel and really heavily edit the crap out of it. Not do that for the whole book because there's not enough time in the world, but and have them use that as a guideline as to how they need to fix the rest of the book, and then hope that they'll do better after that. In in those particular cases, it didn't. The, I worked on them longer after that, or didn't work with them after that. Some of them I never heard from again. Um, so yeah. To somebody asked if you were to create an apprenticeship program, what it would look like. Um, it's writing is such a solitary thing, you know. Um, I mean, I don't think an apprenticeship would really work. A mentorship maybe, where you work with somebody, they send you their drafts and you give them advice and such like that, and there are there are instances of that, with writing classes and cases where writers will take on people as their mentor, work with them on maybe collaborating with them on something. Lots of big name authors have done that with um, lesser known authors, basically giving them an outline to work from and have them write it and treat it as a collaboration, and working with them to make their work better. Um, there are plenty of people who got their start that way. So yeah, like what uh, like what James Patterson does with his collaborators, and McCaffrey did that with a bunch of different people as well. Um, so, as for the Orville, I must confess I have not actually watched the Orville past the third episode simply because there are too many TV shows and not enough time. I do want to catch up with it at some point. Um, What I've seen of it, my most my opinion to be Seth MacFarlane, where Fox will give you millions of dollars to basically do your very own Star Trek fanfic. Um, Having said that, I've heard good things about it and do want to catch up with it at some point. I just haven't had time to yet. Be a start. Um, so uh, Fox is no better or worse about good science fiction than anybody. The ultimately every TV show lives or dies on the basis of how many people actually watch it, and in relation to how much money it costs to make. Um, the like everybody talks about how horrible it was that Fox canceled Firefly. Fox canceled Firefly because it cost at the time a ridiculous amount of money per episode, and nobody was freaking watching it. The ratings were in the toilet, and while there are some shows that can survive low ratings because they don't cost a lot to make, Firefly cost a great deal to make. Firefly is the kind of show that really needed to come along like 6 or 7 years after it did. Um, it it needed to be something that was done on HBO or Showtime or later on Netflix or Hulu or something. Uh, Something where the um, pickiness of the volatility of commercial television wouldn't be a factor. But, are there franchises that you would love to write for but haven't? Oh yes, there are plenty. Going back to the '90s when I first got into the business and on into the current time, um, I would kill to write a Star Wars book. I have tried pitching myself at the Star Wars editors to with no luck so far. I've actually been more interested in Star Wars since Disney took over. Um, and I've been very fascinated by the expanding of the worlds they've been doing lately, and I would love to work in that. I wanted to write a Battlestar Galactica novel when the new show debuted, but the editor in question wasn't interested. Uh, Way back in the Mister Prehistory, I actually pitched a Highlander novel and a Quantum Leap novel, either of which went through. Highlander novel was frustrating because there were three of us writing pitches and they only had one slot, and it went to somebody else. That was frustrating, but um, the and there have been tons of others. I would have loved to have written a Homicide: Life on the Street novel. There were two of those, but they were written by Jerome Preisler, who's like an award-winning mystery author, who makes much more sense to write that than me. Um, I do remember one particular similar instance when the CSI shows were all on the air. Um, uh, the Simon and Schuster had the rights to do novels based on them, and then CSI New York debuted, and they were going to do CSI New York novels. Not having seen it because it hadn't even started yet, I went to the editor and said, "Ooh, I would love to do that. It would be cool. Please, can I get a shot at that?" And the editor was like, "Well, we've actually got Stuart Kaminsky, who's an Edgar Award-winning mystery author," and I'm like, "Fine." It did four CSI New York books. Stewart wrote the first three, and the reason why he wrote the first three is he did not want to write a fourth. Stewart had never done tie-in books before, and he has since passed away. But he, I don't think, was ever going to do another tie-in book again after that experience. He did not enjoy uh, writing tie-ins is not for everyone, and you have to have an even thicker skin than you already have to have when you're writing your own stuff, because you're writing in somebody else's world, and you're writing um, for people who can change anything at their discretion because they own it and they can do whatever the hell they want with it. Um, so that and Stewart did not like working under those circumstances. So the editor was Jen Heddle, who now works for Star Wars, and but at the time she was an editor for Simon Schuster and handling this, and she uh, um, said to me, "Hey, still want to write a CSI New York book?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't actually say what I was thinking, which was actually I really hate the show and I don't want to write about it." But I decided no, let's go ahead and do this, and I did, and it was great, uh, and I enjoyed doing it. Actually, it wound up being tremendous fun that I got to do it. So, anyway, oops, I lost. Oh, there's the chat. I'm sorry, I lost the chat. It's better now. Most awesome person you got to meet because of writing. Um, I've gotten to meet lots of awesome people just by going to conventions and such, which has always been uh, wonderful. Um, hmm, uh, and there's some people I met from like when I was editing, so that doesn't really. Um, but probably. Um, I mean, I've gotten to meet a bunch of actors over the years. Um, some of whom were really wonderful. J.G. Hertzler played Martok on Deep Space Nine, who's become like a friend. Armin Shimmerman, also from Deep Space Nine. Ben Browder from Farscape, as well as honestly most of the actors from Farscape. I got to at least meet and hang out with. Um, I wrote a lot of different Farscape material over the years, including the Farscape comic book that came out from 2008 to 2011. A lot of there's a lot of awesome people I've met. Um, Probably one of the more amusing ones. Not so much that because he's necessarily an awesome person, but just because of the way the conversation went. Um, was when Ashley Edward Miller, who's a screenwriter, among other things, he was the co-writer of Thor and X Men First Class. Um, he worked on like Fringe and on Robin and a bunch of others. He introduced me to Robert Meyer Burnett, who was the director of Free Enterprise, which was one of my favorite movies from the late '90s. And I was telling him how much, oh my God, it's so glad to meet you because I loved Free Enterprise, and he wasn't listening because he was too busy saying, oh my God, it's so great to meet you because I loved Articles of the Federation. So we were fangoobering over each other. That was fun. And one of the more amusing circumstances, there was one convention that I was a guest at, Armin Shimmerman was a guest at, and Ben Browder was a guest at it. And there was a meet and greet Friday night, and I had just started dating my wife Ren, and I'm talking with Ben Browder because we hadn't seen each other in a while. We're catching up, and Ren is sitting at the same table with Armin Shimmerman, and Armin starts quizzing her like he's my uncle or something to make sure are you good enough to date Keith? Because we'd only been dating for like a year at that point, and she said that freaked her out a little bit to be grilled um, by Principal Snyder about that. Um, yeah, I've gotten to meet a lot of awesome people. It's getting to collaborate. Probably the most awesome person I got to meet because of writing specifically um, is uh, because I got to write with him was Rockne O'Bannon, who is the creator of Farscape. And Rockne and I got to collaborate. I first met Rockne at a publishing party for my Farscape novel House of Cards, which came out in 2001. The Jim Henson Company threw a little publishing party for it, and they flew Rockne in for it. And Rockne had actually read the book and loved it. And we stayed in touch after that. And we, when the comic book came around and Rockne was plotting it and they needed somebody to script it, Rockne pushed me at Boom Studios. And we got to work together for 3 wonderful years. Uh, him plotting and me scripting and us working together on it. Um, and it was just that was an absolute joy and one of the best experiences I've had as a writer was getting to and specifically as a tie-in writer getting to work with the creator of the show. It's just fantastic. Any other questions? There must be other questions. In R.A. Salvatore? Well, I mean, we have a running joke with me, R.A. Salvatore, Kurt R.A. Giambastiani, R.A. Jones, um, all the other RAs floating around out there. R.A. Lafferty. Um, we have with the RA Club. and I don't know what they all stand for, but I've collaborated with a bunch of different people over the years. Most recently with Dr. Manish K. Batra and David Sherman. With Manish, I've written a thriller called about a serial killer called Animal, and we're in the middle of I'm in the middle of revising a medical thriller we've written together, which has the tentative title of Pigman. And it's interesting. Everybody I've collaborated with has been different from everybody else I've collaborated with. Um, and it's a fascinating process. There isn't anybody I specifically necessarily want to collaborate with, but I'm open to excuse me, I'm open to whatever possibilities there are of doing so in the future. um, you have a genre that flows more naturally than the others. Probably science fiction, fantasy, and mystery, which are the ones I write primarily in. And superhero stuff also. I can do all of those fairly easily. There are others that are a little harder. I've done uh, thrillers. I've done men's adventure stuff. I've done what is basically a self help book, um, sort of. It was a book I did called The Klingon Art of War, which is a kind of violent self help book uh, that was published in 2014. And that was way more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But generally, the genres that I enjoy the most as a reader also are the ones that are easiest for me to write. Science fiction, fantasy, mystery, superhero stuff. Those are my favorite. What's been the easiest property for you to write for? Probably Star Trek, just because I've done so much of it. B, Star Trek has been part of my life literally since birth. Um, my parents watched Star Trek when it originally aired in the '60s, and I grew up watching the reruns in syndication. Um, I grew up in New York City, and in throughout the 1970s in New York City, one of the local independent stations, which now is a CW affiliate, but it was an independent station at the time, aired reruns of Star Trek every night at 6 o'clock, and we would every night we would watch Star Trek and then eat dinner. That was what we did. Um, uh, that was so yeah. I can write Star Trek in my sleep and have written Star Trek. There are others I've also enjoyed. Like I love writing in the Marvel Comics milieu, which I've done quite a bit, uh, and that usually comes pretty easily. Farscape certainly came easily. Um, that one that again partly because I was working with the creator, but even before even with the novel I wrote, that one just came very easily. I had a very strong affinity for that particular show. Um, and I have written horror too. I should have mentioned horror. Most of my horror, I keep forgetting that like I've written Supernatural, I've written Buffy, I've written the serial killer book. I've written plenty of horror. I just don't think of myself as a horror writer for some. As for which Star Trek show is my favorite, at the moment the answer to that question is Deep Space Nine. I have a feeling that it's going to be getting some competition from Strange New Worlds. Um, Based on what I've seen of the show so far, but we'll see. But for the moment, Deep Space Nine is my favorite. I grew up with the original series. I love Next Generation and the original series both. Um, I have a greater appreciation now for Voyager than I did when it first aired. Um, I'm not as impressed with Enterprise. Uh, the current shows, it's a little harder to because I don't have the same distance from them. However, of the current shows, I will say that Prodigy is fantastic, and Prodigy is another one that's challenging for my favorite. Um, Prodigy is superb, and if you haven't seen that on Paramount Plus, I strongly recommend it. It is the best of the current shows. Discovery's gotten a lot better since they jumped. The third and fourth seasons are a lot better than the first and second season. Um, the card's been a mess. I don't. It's been kind of all over the place. Um, Lower Decks is getting better. I think Lower Decks is at its best when it's uh, a a comedic Star Trek show as opposed to a a Star Trek comedy, as opposed to a workplace office comedy crowbarred into the Star Trek universe. Um, when it's just doing straight up Star Trek that happens to be funny, it is so much better. Um, so. Which of your own stories is your favorite? That's just mean. Um, uh, the the two I mentioned are actually two of my favorites. The two I mentioned earlier, the Articles of the Federation and Blackout. Um, However, another one I would throw in there because it's a short story and it's also a tie-in, but it's a Zorro short story I wrote in 2011 called "Letter from Guadalajara," which I am inordinately proud of. The This is a story I was invited to do a story for More Tales of Zorro, 2011, which was the follow up to Tales of Zorro. It was published by Moonstone Books. The editor was the late Richard Dean Starr, who unfortunately died earlier this year from COVID. But Richard basically, after he did Tales of Zorro, he then went to a completely different set of writers for More Tales of Zorro, which was cool. And I wanted to tell the story of Captain Monasterio, who is Zorro's main bad guy, military commander of the Pueblo of Los Angeles, and he is the main villain in a lot of Zorro stories. I wanted to know what made him tick. Why was he the way he was? So I basically did the secret origin of Captain Monasterio, and I had some basic ideas in my head of what I wanted to do, and I bopped it around in my head a little bit. I'm taking the bus home, uh, sitting on the bus, and all of a sudden, one line of dialogue pops into my head, which is Monasterio talking to Zorro and saying, "You see, Zorro, while your mask frees you, my rank shackles me." And then the entire flippin' story core dumps into my head. I'm sitting there on a bus bouncing, and it's like we get to my stop. I run home, briefly acknowledge my girlfriend at the time, and sit down. And this story just jumps out and writes itself down. In like 2 hours, I've written a 6,000 word story, um, and it is still one of my favorite things that I've written uh, in any form. Um, I will also give kudos to a another one uh, that I wrote, a comic book actually, one of the Farscape comic books. There was one issue uh, of Farscape, uh, which was called The Mediocre Escape, which only focused on Scorpius and Rigel. They were the only two characters in that issue, and I had so much fun with that. Rigel is the most fun to write out of all of them, and I really really enjoyed that one. So, those are among favorites. And yes, I see we've got Margot put up some links here. Um, yes, you can find my stuff on Amazon. You can my website at DeCandido.net desperately needs updating. Right now, it looks like it was cobbled together by some idiot who learned HTML in 1996. That's because I learned HTML in 1996. Um, so it has all the charm of a very old GeoCities webpage. Um, but it serves its purpose mainly, which is as a link dump to all the different ways you can cyberstalk me. Um, I'm uh, I'm online I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube also. I have a YouTube channel that I started during the apocalypse of 2020, um, which is called Crad COVID Readings. Just put a link up there. Um, which is me reading my short fiction. And I may revive that soon because I've written more short stories since then. Um, Throughout 2020, I read pretty much every single one of my works of short fiction, and then in 2021, I read specifically my Starfleet Corps of Engineers novellas that I'd written over the years. Then I took a break. That actually got me to 100 installments of it. Um, I'm uh, that and that was a lot of fun to do, and it was something that that a lot of people appreciated during the apocalypse. And I said I've written enough more short stories since I went on my hiatus that it might be worth reviving the channel for a bit to do that just to keep. Um, uh, my cats. I have two cats, Kaylee and Louie. They are both black cats. Um, Kaylee, they are both incredibly friendly and sweet and photogenic. Um, Neither of them are in the office with me. Amazingly enough, they're downstairs with my wife. But they are both very affectionate and very sweet and incredibly affectionate, and they love people, especially Louis. Um, and and if you subscribe, if you join my Patreon at the level of $2 a month or higher, you will get regular cat pictures, mostly of Kaylee and Louie. Every once in a while, there are guest cats and also the occasional guest dog, um, because we visit people and occasionally we'll dog or cat sit. But the vast majority of the pictures are of either Kaylee, Louie, or both. Um, yes, there are 862 pictures, and there will be more. I've already scheduled like for the next several days. That the way the Patreon works is for $1 a month you get a monthly movie review. For $2 a month you get that plus the regular cat pictures, which are not quite daily, but there's usually a lot of them. The For $5 a month and up you get the movie reviews, the cat pictures, and TV reviews, which I'm behind on, but I need to get a few more of those up. $7 a month, you get the TV reviews, the movie reviews, the cat pictures, and also weekly excerpts from whatever my current work in progress is. For $10 a month, you get all that plus a monthly vignette featuring my original characters. So not for my tie-in fiction, but I have several original things going on, including the Precinct series, which is a mix of epic fantasy and police procedure. A bunch of urban fantasies set in New York City, involving a couple of supernatural hunters for hire. Um, some urban fantasy set in Key West, featuring a young woman named Cassie Zukov, who's a bit of a weirdness magnet, and the Super City Cops series, which is about cops in a city filled with superheroes. Um, and also occasional stories, vignettes featuring Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson, which is my Sherlock Holmes pastiche that I've done 2 stories in and want to do more. Um, that is a modern version of Holmes and Watson with a young woman named Shirley Holmes and a medical student named Jack Watson. Uh, the Precinct series is, in fact, my longest running series. There are 5 novels and 1 short story collection, and I have my contract covers 3 more. I'm sorry, 2 more novels and 1 more short story collection. I am hoping to have both Phoenix Precinct and more Tales from Dragon Precinct out in 2023. That is the current plan. Um, the editor, everybody needs an editor. To answer that question, doth the editor need an editor? But I have some. Everything I do is edited by somebody. Um, I don't actually self-publish. Everything is published by a publisher. Um, uh, like I said, Ren and I have started a small press, but that's to do like 1 book every 2 years or something. We don't have any major plans for that, and I I always make sure everything I write has at least 1 person editing it. Um, so yeah. Um, the Precinct series, as I said, is a mix of epic fantasy and police procedure. I pitch it as Law and Order meets Lord of the Rings. One reviewer called it Dungeons and Dragnet. So it takes place in your classic high fantasy setting with humans and elves and dwarves and wizards and magic and stuff. But the main characters are detectives who solve crimes. The first book, Dragon Precinct, it starts with it was inspired. The 2 main characters are actually based on D&D characters that I played in college and in my 20s. Um, and but they're detectives. The first book begins with a group of adventurers gathering at an inn to go off on a heroic quest. They are not the heroes; they are the victims. One of them winds up dead, and our main characters, the detectives, who have to figure out why this party has been targeted, because a couple more of them also came. That's it.
My
Are there
my dog is not letting me type anymore.
dogs are like that? My cats do that sometimes too. Kaylee in particular will love to just jump in my lap for no good reason while I'm trying to work.
So you wrote a Darkness Falls book.
Yes, it was a novelization of the film.
Okay, so that is just taking the film and making it into a novel.
Correct. I have done that with done a bunch of movie novelizations, including Serenity, the first 3 Resident Evil films, Darkness Falls,
Gargantua?
Gargantua. Yes, that was a Fox TV movie in 1998 that starred Adam Baldwin as a marine biologist. I'll tell you what.
That
And I actually wrote also 2 movie novelizations that will never be published, I can't say what they are.
well, that's rude.
And I wrote 1 TV novelization for Buffy. I novelized 3 Xander focused episodes, all appropriately the Xander year.
Every
But yeah, that in those cases, that's taking the script and adapting it into novel form. So it's not just a tie-in; it's a direct adaptation.
every time I look at the list of books that you have written, it's overwhelming.
I got to keep writing them because if I stop writing them, they stop paying me. And
You did a Kung Fu Panda comic?
I did, yes, I did. It was a backup story in 1 issue of a Kung Fu Panda comic, and I would have loved to have done more, but it didn't work out. I had so much fun with that. Especially because I'm also a martial artist, so and I actually pitched a bunch of other KFP stories, but it just, like I said, it never worked out. I would have loved to have. Still would love to if someday someone decides that.
What is Without a License, the Fantastic Worlds of You?
That's a short story collection.
Oh, nice.
It's a collection of 11 short stories. And yeah, 11 of my short stories. At the time, I didn't have that many stories that weren't tie-in. That's why we called it Without a License, because it was all my original. There are 2. There's a Precinct story that was published there for the first time, and a Cassie Zukov story that was published there. And then also reprints of a bunch of works of short fiction that I'd done over the years.
That is amazing.
And eventually, I want to do another collection at some point because I've written a lot more short fiction.
I'm gonna have to get all your book. Well, I'm gonna have to get a chunk of your books. I don't have enough space for all of your books.
So you can get them as ebooks.
Oh yeah, I forget that I have a Kindle.
They don't take up as much room. They're not. You don't have to move them when they're heavy, and I still get my money. I'm good.
There you go. We have to wrap it up. So, where would you like people to come find you?
Well, the website DeCandido.net is a handy link dump for all the different ways that I can cybertalk. Again, terrible website. It will be updated eventually, but at the very least, it will link you to my Facebook page, my Twitter feed, my Instagram account. I do a great deal of writing, as I said, for Tor.com. You can find me there. You can go to my Patreon. And I have a blog. We forgot to mention the blog because I'm one of the few people who does that. I try to update the blog on a semi-regular basis, and again, the Patreon, the YouTube channel, all of those are places where I can. Right now, for Tor.com, the 2 main things I am doing for them is a weekly rewatch of Star Trek Enterprise. I've already rewatched the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager for the site. I am currently rewatching Enterprise. That goes live every Monday. And I am also reviewing each new episode of the various shows on Paramount Plus as they come out. And since they are committed to a new Star Trek pretty much every week at this point, that means basically every Thursday there's going to be a new review by them. Currently reviewing the new episodes of Star Trek Picard as they come out. I'll be reviewing, and I've got reviews going back of each episode of Discovery, Lower Decks, Picard, and short treks as well. And I will be reviewing Strange New Worlds when it comes out. I've also got. I didn't do episode by episode reviews of Prodigy, but I did a couple of reviews of the early episodes. First 10. And I also have a feature on Tor.com called the Great Superhero Movie Rewatch. From 2017 to 2020, I reviewed every single live-action movie based on a superhero comic book, which did in fact take 2.5 years.
Wow, and, that's a lot of movies.
And I revisit that feature every 6 months or so because they keep releasing new ones. So June, this summer is going to be a particularly big one because I'm going to be covering Spider-Man: No Way Home, The King's Man, The Batman, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and Morbius, as well as a couple that I missed in my first.
That is amazing. Favorite slash least favorite Batman?
Oh, Kevin Conroy is favorite. Duh. I mean, that's not even a question. Um, Jason O'Mara is not bad, and several of the live action people have been interesting, but Kevin Conroy is the voice I hear when I read Batman. Nobody has ever captured his essence any better than that. Least favorite are the two doofuses during the in World War II. They released a couple of movie serials during the 1940s, which were incredibly terrible uh, and yeah, they were horrible.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming and doing this. It means the world to
Oh, it
me.
was absolutely my pleasure.
And I will poke you when we do this again next year.
That would be great. I would be happy to come back.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Keith, for coming and answering all of our questions and talking to us. And
My pleasure.
everybody should go give this man at least $2 to see the adorable cats
I'd be okay with that.
that I am now watching. I spent half of this just scrolling through looking at your cat pictures.
I will. I do want to say to comment one last comment in the chat there, which is that whatever my issues with Star Trek Picard are, and I have several, Stewart himself has been excellent. I am also amused to see that finally, after 40 years, he finally looks his age. The man had not aged at all between like 1984 and 2015 or so, and then finally he started.
He's a vampire, and we're all aware.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Anyway,
so much.
thank you guys ever so much. I had a wonderful time, and I hope to see lots of you folks on my various social media thingies.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you all for hanging out. And our next panel will be up accessibility and gaming in just a few minutes.